And now it is my pleasure and honor to introduce to you Varsen Aghabekian, who was appointed Foreign Minister of Palestine this past June, having previously served as Deputy Minister for nearly a year. She previously served as Commissioner General of the Palestinian Independent Commission for Human Rights. She studied in the US, has her PhD earned from the University of Pittsburgh. Welcome to the University of Iceland. And we also have Davíð Logi Sigurðsson, who will join her after her speech for a conversation. But Dr. Aghabekian, the floor is yours.
Good day to all, and it's a great, great pleasure and honor to be in Iceland and to be here today. Iceland is very dear to our hearts. Iceland was one of the first countries that recognized the state of Palestine. And today, many other countries are following suit. And I believe had they done this when Iceland recognized, maybe our situation would be different. It's also a pleasure for me to be here because I was, for many years, an academic myself. And I love academic environments because in an academic environment, you think. You think and you worry about humanity and you worry about development. And you reflect and you free yourself sometimes from whatever is happening around you. And today, before we start our discussion, I would like to zoom into one specific aspect that influences a lot of what we are in or what we do as politicians, as diplomats, as academicians, you name it. And that is of international law. So why is it so important for me to discuss international law? It is important because I believe that as a Palestinian, the lack of applying international law for many, many years is what has gotten us where we are today. And the pain and the suffering of my people is a result, a direct result of the inapplicability of international law. Because if international law is unequally applied, then the rule-based order that all of you, all of your parents and grandparents, all of your countries have strived to develop goes into shambles. And inapplicability limits the law of power, and you end up living in a world that is governed by the law of jungle. International law also should be preventing war crimes and protecting civilians, which I don't see when it comes to Palestine or other areas in this world. It should forbid occupation, under which I have been living for many, many decades now. And it should give me my right to self-determination. And today, because of the inapplicability of that law, I am deprived of that right, because there are some certain powers that put a limit on that. So international law is not an abstract word. It is in the UN conventions, it is in the Geneva Conventions, it is in the Genocide Convention, it is part of the center of UN work, it is part of the ICJ's work, it is part of the ICC's work, and yet we see it applied differently in different parts of the world. When human rights are violated in Ukraine, the whole world is upside down. When human rights have been violated for decades in Palestine, we have not seen the same response. And we need to ask why. Aren't we the same people? Aren't we all created by the same God? Shouldn't we enjoy the same rights? Why would people in the north enjoy more rights than people in the south? All these questions are very much related to how we apply international law. And the authority and credibility of institutions that say they go by international law is jeopardized. Is jeopardized, and the responsibility is on all of us to keep pushing. States that say they are for international law and they respect human rights and say they need to comply with international law, they need to do so. Exactly that, and nothing but that. And we see today that there are states that claim they are for international law, but they don't comply with international law, and they force others not to comply with international law. That brings me to the case of Palestine, where I have been living under a lingering occupation for 7 decades now. And I tell you, occupation is so ugly. No one would want to live under occupation, and no one would embrace that occupation with open arms, even if they say you have a 5-star occupation. No occupation is a 5-star occupation, and people will struggle against occupation. That's a natural thing for people to do when they want to liberate themselves. And they have been long-term violations of human rights under this specific occupation. And if you have a check on the human rights people enjoy elsewhere, people in Iceland enjoy, I can assure you that every single aspect of those human rights is violated in Palestine. From my right to move, from my right to education, from our right to healthcare, from our right to worship, you name it, violations are left and right. None of the UN resolutions pertaining Israel-Palestine have been complied with. And I can assure you there have been hundreds of General Assembly resolutions, no compliance. Tens of UN Security Council resolutions, none complied with. The occupier, because of non-compliance, has been able to change the geography and demography of occupied territory. And we know for a fact that this is a violation of international law, because the Geneva Convention says very clearly an occupier cannot change the geography or the demography of occupied land. And we see that, and the occupier state of Israel has, for the last 7 decades, changed the geography and the demography by building illegal settlements on occupied territory and moving illegal settlers from Israel proper to occupied territory. Today we have some 750 to 900,000 illegal Israeli settlers on occupied Palestinian territory, which is today the occupied state of Palestine. Land confiscation is a continuous process. Home demolitions of Palestinians is ongoing. Violation of human rights left and right, and the whole thing has culminated in the aggression on Gaza. Now, the aggression on Gaza and the violence, I know people say that October 7th was violent. Yes, it was violent. It was very violent. I acknowledge that. But it cannot be seen divorced from a context of violence for over 7 decades. But that violence on October 7th has brought a response that is way much more violent than the violence exercised on October 7th. I'm not saying that, this makes it more violent or this makes it less violent. Violence is violence, but we need to understand violence in the context in which it has been happening. The aggression on Gaza has produced a staggering toll. Some 70,000 killed, 70,000. Some 170,000 injured. And God knows how many more under the rubble, still missing. We don't know their fate. 20% of a population has been either killed, injured, a whole family obliterated, families of 100, 150, 200 family members gone from the population registry. impeding humanitarian assistance, displacement of 2.3 million people, not once, not twice, not 3 times. And these people were refugees initially. They are refugees from villages in Israel proper. So they were made refugees twice, 3 times, 10 times. Can you imagine 2.3 million people made refugees in an area that is as small as 365 square kilometers? Today in Gaza, over 60, 70,000 live on 1 square kilometer. Even if you had them standing up, that area would not suffice. Aid workers have been killed. Some 500 aid workers have been killed. 500 people have died because of starvation. Starvation in this day and age. Starving children. And we've seen it unfolding. We've seen people brutalized, massacred for over 2 years. And the international community kept watching. Some of it was silenced because they wanted to. Some of it was silenced by the more powerful. And some have spoken about it. They had the courage to speak about it. We had over 270 journalists killed. No international journalists were allowed in Gaza. And this is against the law. None. And this was part of the measure on silencing the truth. Because the occupied state didn't want the story to come out. But the stories were coming out. We had our own journalists. But of course, international journalists are seen as more credible. But you've seen the pictures, you've seen the photos of the brutal killing, you've seen the photos of starving children, the emaciated bodies. You cannot say, I didn't know. This aggression, I believe, was one of the most publicized aggressions in modern history. And it will go in books of history as such. But why did we reach that stage? We reached that stage because of the impunity with which an aggressor was granted. Had international law been applied much earlier, that aggressor could not do whatever it was doing in Gaza or the West Bank or East Jerusalem, because all of it is one integral entity. They cannot be divorced. And nothing justifies what happened in Gaza. Absolutely nothing. This should ring a very alarming bell. Because if Israel could get away with it, anyone can get away with it. If you can get away with impunity, why would you change course? And if we want you to change course, we need to have measures that will deter you from doing whatever you are doing. And if this continues, I can assure you that whatever your countries have worked for after World War II on developing this rule-based world order would crumble. Because Israel is doing it, others are doing it, and so tomorrow the powerful will do it also. And why not? So why am I bringing international law in an academic setup? It's important because you teach, some of you, the professors here, and the students learn how to think about the law. Think about the law. And that law must not be taught as a doctrine. It must be taught as a law-binding issue, not just on paper. And it should be used with friends and adversaries. The same law applies. The same law applies to any state, any nation, any color, any ethnicity, any religion. And we need to train our lawyers and diplomats, journalists and all, to hold line and go by international law when it's uncomfortable. Not only when it's okay, but when the situation is uncomfortable. That's when it is most needed. When we live with atrocities that we see unfolding in front of us, there's no way we can say we didn't know. Today we all know. We have all seen it. And the question is, today, what will we do with what we know? How do we take this further? How do we hold people accountable? Because today the game is that of accountabilities and responsibilities. And people and nations and states should be held to account. We should not accept ever that any religion, any nation, any ethnicity has a right to violate international law. And only 2-3 days ago, a post by one of the settler ministers in the Israeli government, Bezalel Smotrich, said very clearly, international law does not apply to Jews. International law applies to everyone else, but not the chosen people. This is a leader, this is somebody in government that is saying to the world that, you can trash your international law because I'm entitled to do whatever I need to do. And that same government, with the same kinds of people, are telling the world that we can infringe on the sovereignty and the independence of any neighboring country because we think we should and we know we can. So I want you to just think about that. If Smotrich can say it, why not somebody else somewhere else pretty soon? So the issue is not just about Palestine. It's about whether international law still means anything and whether international law can become the framework by which we can look at Palestine, Israel, or other places in the world. And in this regard, I want to conclude with President Trump's plan for Gaza. We believe that plan is just an initial step, a prelude to something that needs to be much, much bigger. Because that is one step. The ceasefire is just one step. That plan needs to be tied with international law. Because if it is not tied with international law, it is just a drop in a bucket that is divorced from the reality of the conflict. And the conflict is that of occupation. So we need to tie it with international law. We need to make sure that the occupied territories are not looked upon as separate entities. The occupied territory is one integrated piece of land, including Gaza, the West Bank, and occupied East Jerusalem. And this effort must be aligned with the implementation of international law, the terms of reference for peace, and the recent New York Declaration. The New York Declaration has been signed by over 2/3 of the world countries, have been endorsed by all the countries that have recognized the state of Palestine, and that should be the entry point. So the Trump plan should be part and parcel of that New York Declaration that delineates very carefully the points by which we should dismantle this occupation and materialize the state of Palestine. So my invitation is very simple. Let us hold this case to the same rules we demand elsewhere. Palestine deserves to be looked upon just like we look at any other country anywhere on this planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. You asked some very pertinent questions, and you gave a very fine overview on the sort of background from an international law perspective. If you don't mind, I do want to ask first one question, sort of taking us back a little bit before we talk about the here and now. And it has to do with your background, because you're somewhat unusual in the sense that you are the first female foreign minister in Palestine, and you are of Armenian origin,
Yes.
and you are a Christian.
Yes.
So I'm just curious if you allow me to ground us in this conversation in yourself and your background and the society that you come from, and then we can sort of try and link that into.
That's a very good opening question, and I'm asked that wherever I go. But that's the beauty of Palestine. To me, it's very natural. This is what Palestine and Palestinians are all about. I mean, in Palestine, I know from my great-grandparents, from my grandparents, we have Muslims, Christians, Jews, people of various ethnicities, Armenians, Greeks, all living and coexisting together. And we had that beautiful mosaic and coexistence 100 years ago. This can come back. But this was severed in 1947-48. And I keep asking, wherever I go, where do you see a woman, a Christian woman in a predominantly Muslim environment, Minister of Foreign Affairs? You rarely see that. But I want to stress again that this is the beauty of Palestine. This is the Palestine we want for the future. And this is the Palestine we are working to achieve. And in that regard, we would like the support of the whole world, because that's exactly the vision that we have for Palestine. And ethnic groups enjoy the same freedom anybody enjoys in Palestine, be it Armenians, be it Greeks, Copts, you name it. And we are contributors. We are in various fields. You see us in politics, in engineering, in medicine, you name it. And we have never, ever felt different.
Is there and I asked that question for a reason, because I think often the images of suffering are so overwhelming that they take us away from the reality that is in part and could be. So trying to get away, we can never get away from the images and the suffering. But how do we sort of bridge that gap in the eyes of the world? Because I think that's sort of part of the issue, is that you're defined by your suffering in a way.
Yes, we have been victims, but we cannot continue showing ourselves as victims. We are people who have aspirations. We are people who have dignity. We are people who have the resolve to end the suffering and just unleash our potential. And as such, we want to present ourselves. Yes, I am in a lot of pain. Yes, my people are suffering. But I cannot sit and lament the whole time. I need to work. I need to move on. We need, as a people, to show the world that we deserve to free ourselves. And you can imagine, if we as Palestinians have endured this suffering for 70 years under the most brutal conditions, the question is, what can we do if our potential is unleashed? And this is what we need to get to. We need to unleash that potential. We need a space to breathe so that we can show the world what we can do. We have done a lot in neighboring countries. And you can imagine what we will be able to do for our own. But we need to get rid of this occupation. We cannot flourish and thrive under occupation. But despite all that, we are committed to do our best, but not only as victims.
I need to address sort of another question that for some is also defining, which is obviously the reality created by Hamas. So I wanted to ask you, because obviously you come from, I mean, there was basically a split. And Hamas is the ugly side of whatever, for most that is sort of the unacceptable side of the equation. What is the current state of conversations, if there is any, between the PA in Ramallah and Hamas, mostly in Gaza, and sort of how did we get to this place? From, I guess any movement is has conflicts within itself at some point. But if you go back 40 years, the Palestinians, in that sense, were politically united. How did we get to this here and now in this sense? And how do we deal with the issue that is Hamas?
We got to this situation because of the inaction and the inapplicability of international law. When we went into a peace agreement with Israel in the mid-1990s, it was very clear that we are going into an agreement in which we have conceded 78% of historic Palestine. We have recognized Israel on 78% and said that we want to build our state on the 22%. The Palestinian Authority was established, and we had a leeway of 5 years to air out all final status issues. What happened in those 5 years? The number of settlements tripled, the number of settlers quadrupled, we had the apartheid wall, we had more violations, etc., etc. The Palestinian Authority was undermined in every form and shape. And the Palestinian Authority said very clearly, we espouse nonviolence, no more violence. We will go into our liberation through international law and through agreements signed. So when our kids are looking at us and saying, you have signed these agreements, and what have you brought us after signing those agreements? You have entrenched the occupation and emboldened it, and our lives today are much more difficult than we had 40 years ago. So some said, if nonviolence has not brought anything, maybe violence would. And if you were living in Gaza and under siege for almost 2 decades, not being able to go out, having so many restrictions on your mobility, then you would think maybe violence will do something about it. So they started this violent attack. Today, Hamas is saying very clearly, I don't want anything to do with the governance of Gaza in the day after, and I'm ready to put down my weapons, hand the weapons to others. And the Palestinian Authority is saying it very clearly. If Hamas, as part and parcel of the Palestinian society, I mean, Hamas is not a building that you can bring down. Hamas is an ideology. But that ideology, if it wants to be part of the Palestinian political spectrum, it needs to subscribe to the mandate of the PLO. And the mandate of the PLO is very clear. 2 states living side by side in peace and security, State of Israel on 78%, State of Palestine on the 22%, living in good, friendly, neighborly relations. Hamas would need to be a political party, not a military faction, and it needs to respect the agreement signed by the PLO and needs to accept the vision of the PLO of the future Palestine. If they would subscribe to that, then they are welcomed to be part of the PLO and be in the middle, in the opposition, just like any other political party elsewhere. You have parties on the left and you have parties on the right and in the middle. But no militarization, no weaponization. It would be one state, one government, one constitution, one law, and one weapon. You
referred to the Trump peace plan earlier. So my question to you is, because that is a plan that is put forward, and the deal announced a couple of days ago is for a ceasefire negotiated between, I guess, Hamas and Israel. What is your role currently? Are you in touch with the powers that are behind this peace plan? Do you have a role? And if not, is it your intention to find that role, and how would you do that?
Yes, because it's only natural that a plan that speaks about me should include me. It's only natural. So what we are trying to do right now through the intermediaries, those countries that have been mediating this whole thing, and we thank all of them, because first and foremost, we wanted to end this aggression, because every day that passed meant a loss of more Palestinian civilians, loss of more lives. So the utmost priority was ending the aggression. Now that there's a ceasefire, we need to ensure that this ceasefire becomes a sustainable ceasefire. It's not just for 20 days, 30 days. It is sustainable so that we can embark on something that is bigger, which means starting the rehabilitation process and then the reconstruction of Gaza. You can imagine what rehabilitation and immediate needs would be in a place that is completely devastated. 85% of that infrastructure is not there. You're talking about healthcare, education, culture, water, electricity, streets, you name it. I mean, if you look at Gaza, I don't think any time or anywhere in modern history there is a place so small that has been affected by such destruction. So the enormity of the needs are just unimaginable. And for us Palestinians, it's only natural that it would be the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, that would be engaged, because the only entity that has a mandate, a legal and administrative mandate on the occupied state of Palestine is the PLO. Not any country, but the PLO. So it's a natural evolution that the PLO would be in. Now, the plan in itself does not mention the PLO. Our responsibility today is to find how we will be part of that. Because even if you bring the best of people to govern in Gaza, how will they govern? They need to look at the laws that are implemented on the West Bank, because we're talking about the occupied state of Palestine. And Gaza is part and parcel of the West Bank. If you talk about the population registry, they would come back to the West Bank. So if you talk about the monetary issues, they would come back to the West Bank. So you need to inject that element from the very beginning.
Final question, I think, for me before I take some questions. We take some questions from the audience. I know, because I heard you yesterday clearly, and you want to. I mean, we're on day 2 after a ceasefire deal was announced. So we need to keep our hope, I guess. But there is also this lingering question: is it too late? And I'm referring to the two-state solution, because dealing with settlements will be extremely hard, and it will require will, which may not necessarily be there. So, although I do want my final question to be a question that brings us to hope, the question still has to be: is it too late?
No, it's never too late. It's late on taking action. It's not too late on solving the problem. And the two-state solution is the only viable solution. Because there are other solutions, there are other scenarios. We can continue with the status quo. We will not accept it as Palestinians. We can continue with an apartheid regime. We will fight that apartheid regime. We can go into a one state for all of its citizens. Why not? But if Israel does not accept two states, will it accept a one state whereby Palestinians maybe in 20, 30 years will be the majority? Today we have 7.1 million Palestinians from the river to the sea, and we have 7 million Israelis. And we are a very productive society. So, I mean, Israel will not accept that. The only viable solution is the two-state solution. You've spoken on the settlements. In 1948, 750,000 Palestinians were made refugees, forced to leave from what became Israel proper. Today, we have 750,000 illegal settlers in occupied land. It's much easier to remove illegal settlers than remove the indigenous people of the place. These settlers were incentivized to live in occupied land. They can incentivize them to move back. And most settlers are not living in occupied land because of ideology, maybe a third of them, because of the biblical narrative. But the rest are there for economic reasons, because they can enjoy very nice villas that cost $1 million in Tel Aviv for $150,000 in the West Bank. So when there's a will, there's a way. We need a political will that would say enough is enough. 78% is Israel proper, 22% is the state of Palestine, and that's how we need to move.
Thank you very much. I think I will then ask for some questions from the audience. Gerðu svo vel, viltu, já.
Thank you so much for for everything that you're doing. Thank you so much for telling us what's going on and how you plan to continue. A little bit related to the last question that we just had now. Many Palestinians are not pro the two-state solution, and as we have heard for the last 7 decades, and especially the last 2 years, the horror on the Gaza Strip has been unimaginable. How will you sell the idea of the two-state solution to the people that have lost everything to the Israelis? How do you, not talk them into, but how can you put forward this idea for those people to live alongside with the people that just took everything away from them? How do we continue from that? And I would like to, is it too late? Because I think for many it is. But I want to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you again so much.
By creating a future for these people. Today they see only darkness. They see the smell of death everywhere. They see loss, pain, and suffering. But we need to tell them that there is a future and there are better days. And this better day will only come if the whole world unites in support of that better day by creating a place for them to live. Today, people are going to wake up and look around and take time to think freely without the bombardment. And it will hit them when they see that there's nothing in Gaza. There's no home to go back to. There's no water to drink. There's still no food to eat. Even if 500 trucks are entering every day. Before there were maybe 6 trucks, 100 trucks. Today, even if you enter 1,000 trucks, it's still not enough. So there's urgency for the world to unite and create that better future. Create it with people in their land, not by displacing them again.
We only have time for one quick question. How many? Yeah, there's a hand up there. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And I'm from Armenia, and we have this long conflict with Azerbaijan. And you, as an Armenian, serving the Palestinian government, I would like to know whether do you see any parallels between Armenians and Palestinians struggles for international recognition and justice, And also, do you think that cooperation between such nations can help strengthen the voice of small states in international institutions? Thank you so much.
Yes, as an Armenian Palestinian myself, I know we have a lot that we share in our history, and we can learn from each other. And we can learn from Palestinian experience in terms of forging peace with a neighbor, because I know today Armenia is talking peace with Azerbaijan. And as a person that looks for a future of peace, not war, I can tell you that making war is very simple, very easy. You can make it, but making peace is very difficult, and we know that from history. But we need to, together, Armenia, Palestine, wherever we are, think of peace, because that's the only way you can ensure that there's a better world for your children and your grandchildren.
One more question from our previous foreign minister.
Ah, okay.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive introduction to the situation in Palestine. I just been thinking, if let's say that these plans go ahead and we can see a sustainable peace in Palestine, what about accountability? You talked about impunity and accountability. How do we hold Israel to account for the genocide and for the atrocities that has been happening there? How can that be a part of that plan? Is it possible?
Yes, it's possible, because forging peace does not negate the fact that there were war crimes that were committed and there were people responsible for those crimes. And the course in the ICC, the ICJ, the international platforms must continue, because these people need to pay for what they have done. It doesn't just be wiped, because it won't disappear. No.
Madam Minister, thank you so much for your voice here today, and thank the audience for being a good audience, and thank you so much.
Thank you.